Welcome to 5 and 5 from the One Stop Co-op Shop, where I discuss 5 key elements of a game in about 5 minutes. I'm Michael Kelly, and today I'm looking at X-Men Mutant Insurrection from Fantasy Flight Games. And no disclaimer needed for this one, Colin actually sent me his copy after he did his playthrough. I like Elder Sign pretty well, but when I heard that they were doing an X-Men version of the same system, I got really excited, but Colin didn't like it that much. Clearly, he sent it to me. Did I feel any better about it? Let's find out and get to the list.
I can't stay. No, I always gotta go.
The first mechanic I want to focus on is the bond mechanic, which is pretty cool, something I haven't seen before. It's a mix for me, though, in how it actually turned out. So the idea of this one is great thematically. As your X-Men go on missions with each other, they can form bonds, like falling in love or building respect for one another, and it'll give them different bonuses, often when they go to the same mission together. And then other effects and events can cause those bonds to break, so their love turns to tragedy or their respect turns to hatred, giving them penalties often again when they're on the same mission. And again, I love the theme here. One of the hallmarks of the X-Men comic books are the great relationships between the characters, complicated love triangles, that kind of thing. But it ends up as a mix here because mechanically a lot of the cards aren't that interesting, and they often kind of force your hand, assigning heroes to the same spot, making the tactical landscape less cool. And also, like a lot of elements in the game, they only really reach their full potential when you have maybe 4 characters or more, so it's not that interesting when you go down to lower player counts. But I'm going into a full pro for number 4, focusing on the story cards, the little scenarios you play through. And first of all, I want to compliment the fact that there are a bunch of these. They only have a few cards each, so the deck isn't that huge, but you get a lot of scenarios for a small amount of real estate. And they have nice variety in the objectives they set for you, in the events that take place. Some are longer, some are shorter, some are harder, some are easier. And I love how they each end in a showdown with this tableau of cards that looks like a page straight out of a comic book. Really cool. Although speaking of comic books, that is one negative on this pro, in that if you don't know the arcs they're referencing, they don't really include enough flavor text for you to get the full picture of what's going on, so it's definitely better for comic book fans. Going back down to a mix for number 3 is the co-op play in the game. And they do some nice things here in that every hero has an assist card they can pass to other heroes, which lets you vary the dice they're rolling and also gives them a power they can use. And there are also these mutant cards you can save or recruit as kind of allies, and some of them let you modify the roles of other players. But honestly, once that's out of the way and you've given your assist card to somebody, and often that's a pretty obvious choice, you have a lot of downtime between player turns as you wait for them to roll their dice, and in my experience, it's not that interesting to watch the other players do their thing. So the co-op play is okay, the elements are there, but it doesn't feel that exciting in actual practice, at least for me and my groups. For number 2, I'm going to focus on probably the core mechanic in the game, which is the Yahtzee-style dice rolling, and this is a mix for me. On the positive side, I think they took the basics of the Elder Sign system and added some cool things onto it. It is, of course, a generally tense experience to roll dice and hope you get the right symbols to match up the obstacles you're trying to overcome. And I really like the use of the Magneto faces on the dice corresponding to effects on cards that let you re-roll those dice, but at some kind of cost, often damage. That's a pretty cool choice to make. But interestingly, one of the main reasons this is a mix for me is actually something that I was really excited about when I first heard the game announced, which is the fact that there is more mitigation than in most of these games, and that you can fulfill some of the obstacles or some icons and not necessarily have to get everything in one shot, which sounded great on paper. Like I said, I was excited, but when you actually play, it takes away a ton of the tension, especially when heroes kind of group up on cards. It can be so simple and clear-cut and easy to actually overcome everything. And we're going to end, unfortunately, on a con, a big one for the game, which is the tendency for the difficulty to snowball in either direction. And this really comes down to this threat track, which is both a way you can lose the game and also determines the severity of these random threat cards you draw at the end of each round. And on the easy side of the snowballing, if you can get into the green threat area, you start there at some difficulty settings, or even if you start on a harder difficulty, there are many cards that'll get you into the green. Once you're there, things tend to be very dull because you can generally complete mission cards really easily, and the game is relying on missions to stay in play and continually increase threat to amp up the pressure, so it doesn't really work as intended when you're on the easy side. But then if you go on the hard side and you have too many missions staying in play, you can snowball into an immediate loss way earlier than you feel that you should. So it's unfortunate, but it had a tendency, at least for me, to bring down the whole feel and excitement of the game. So overall, I do think I can recommend X-Men Mutant Insurrection to big X-Men comic fans. I think they'll appreciate the realization of these comic book arcs in the different story cards. And I also think fans of Elder Sign might want to look into it, especially if they thought Elder Sign was a little bit too random, because again, this is a gentler version in a lot of ways. But on the other hand, if you're looking for consistently challenging difficulty, consistent tension in the mechanics, or consistently fast play without a lot of downtime, I think this might be one to avoid, and I personally didn't enjoy it very much. But if you want to see it in action for yourself, click the link that'll go to Colin's recent playthrough. Good gaming, everyone, and I'll see you at the next stop.